Hello and welcome back to the Motogp Xtra podcast. I'm Rhys and joining me as always is Dill. So it was a very special weekend with Le Mans staging the 1000th Grand Prix, and it was fair to say it was a rather chaotic one all around in all three races throughout the weekend, as you'd come to expect with Le Mans, to be completely honest. Always lots of crashes, probably the top crashing track of the year most of the time. But we'll get straight into Moto3 then. Danny Holgado takes his second win of the season. A great race from him. What did you make of Holgado's race, Dill?
Stunning. Second win of the season, like we said. You actually forget when you're watching him that he's in the Tech 3 team and not in the full IO team. That he's like the junior team, we'll say. But he's out doing his factory teammates at the moment, and he's doing a stunning job. Coming into season, last year we expected stuff from him. We got glimpses of his speed, but nothing over a full season. So far this year, 2 race wins. Very quick every weekend. In Moto3, it's very hard to win multiple races. There's just so much chaos. A lot of things can go wrong, but so far from Holgado, after the first couple of rounds we've had, he's done exceptionally well. 2 wins this early in the season really shows that he has a good racecraft, but not only racecraft, he has definitely some serious speed. And going forward, it's going to be hard to beat him.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, because last year, obviously it was his rookie season, he broke his leg in the pre-season last year, I believe, as well. So he was on the back foot sort of heading into his rookie season. Like you say, did show some slight glimpses. I think he got pole position at one race, but I don't remember which one it was, to be completely honest. But he's come out the gates this year, obviously won the first race of the season at Portimao. It's kind of been a little bit more anonymous the last few rounds, but he's been in the front group. It's just like he's not been winning the race or anything like that, but he's been picking up the points exactly like you need to do. And today, on the day when he had the pace, he managed to win it. And you actually make a good point in saying that he's sort of outdoing the IO guys as well, because of course he was in the IO team last year, then moved across to the Tech 3 team. I think he initially was supposed to be with Tech 3 last year, but obviously there was some other rider swaps to do with like Adrian Fernandez and stuff that ended up putting him into IO, but they put him back into Tech 3, and he's doing better. Gets a win for the French team in France as well. Pretty much a perfect weekend for Holgado. And another rider who's going to be pretty happy with his result this race was Ayumu Sasaki. A couple of crashes for him in a row, but fortunately it does seem that he has managed to break that streak, doesn't it, Dill?
Yeah, he said directly after the race that on the last lap he didn't really want to even push for the win. He was kind of happy just to be where he was at the end. And to be fair, we always think these racers, as in they will die for the cause, they will do anything to win. But Sasaki, being probably a bit Japanese in his ways of being a bit more level-headed, is exactly what he needed to do. He needed them 20 points today. After 2 crashes in the last couple of rounds, it's just, you're thinking to yourself, a season could be going away from him. You could be looking at another Dennis Foggia where quick 1 week crash, but 20 points a day, it keeps him in where he needs to be. Now, you need to remember, longest ever GP season, there's going to be mistakes from others, so he's just going to need to keep himself in the group, take as many points, get to your midway part of the season and just reassess. You can never win a championship in the first 5 rounds, but you can sure as hell lose one. And I think Sasaki's realising that, if I'm going to end up crashing this much, I'm out of it regardless of my speed. And I think last year he kind of had the same, where he had speed, made a couple of mistakes, had some bad luck, had a few crashes, and realised that was his title gone. So this year I think he could be getting a few flashbacks. I think today he was probably in the back of his head just thinking, right, get myself on the box, 20 points, go on a run and see where we are when we come to Catalonia later in the year and start to build for the last couple of rounds in the flyaways.
Yeah, well, you did say there that maybe the Japanese part of him made him think, not to push for the win. Obviously, no one told Agora that last year, did they? at Malaysia. But yeah, he's been rapid all year, hasn't he? And he's managed to finally bring home the points. It's been some strange crashes. I think they've all been high sides, I believe, haven't they? All the crashes he's had. So he's been very strange to see that on a Moto3 bike. Like you said, of course, last year he was, again, probably one of the fastest riders. I mean, remember the first round of last year, how far he was in front in Qatar before he had that sort of moment that broke his fairing, and then he sort of just dropped back through the pack. That was terrible. That was the first podcast we ever did talking about that. Must be one of the first topics we ever mentioned on this podcast, actually, back then. But yeah, he obviously learned a little bit from his mistakes of last year, although in his defence, he did get quite unlucky he picked up a few injuries. I don't think all the crashes were his fault, but yeah, 20 points on the board. Obviously, lost another 5 to Holgado, so in that aspect, it's a little bit negative, but get his momentum going. I'm sure it will be Sasaki back on the top step before long. So another one of the championship contenders, kind of did the opposite there of Sasaki. Diogo Moreira, the young Brazilian, unfortunately, very strange crash, but crashed out of, was it P4, P5, out of the lead group either way, chucking away a lot of points, and with Holgado picking up the win, it's a costly mistake for Diogo.
First mistake really of the season from first crash out of the race. He was in the pack, we'll say. I believe P5 or P6, you'd be right in saying he was around there. And at first I thought he came together with Yamanaka on screen, but then when you watch it back, on his own, just over the top. And Le Mans is one of these tracks that's been around for so long that the surface is never great. It doesn't provide great grip. And we saw so many of these crashes throughout all classes where the rear let go. We saw it in GP, we saw it in Moto 2, saw it multiple times in Moto 3. It's just, it shows the low grip. And to be honest, you think with the background of Moreira, he'd actually come to the front in these. And he had pace. It's just a shame mistake. But again, like we said with Sasaki, early in the season, this mistake isn't going to cost him the title yet. You don't believe he's going to have more chances. So kind of need to put it behind. He has a couple of weeks off now before we go to Italy, to Mugello. He just needs to kind of take a step back, reassess, and come back at it. I still fancy him for a lot of race wins and podiums this year. I'm a big fan of Moreira. I really like his style, and he has the pace. He just maybe is his season too early yet to challenge for the championship. I don't know, but for now, he just needs to keep building the momentum and just kind of brush this off and get back on the horse, as they say.
Yeah, it's certainly a little mistake. Won't cost him too much. Not going to be too harsh on him because, like you say, it's very easy to do. There's lots of crashes every year in Le Mans. Obviously, most of that is to do with temperature of the surface. Obviously, it's an old track, like you say, but the Bugatti layout probably doesn't get a lot of running throughout the year. It's obviously more of a motorcycle thing, isn't it, really, the Bugatti layout. Obviously, you get the 24 hours of Le Mans, the motorcycle version running there. Obviously, you get Motogp. Obviously, you get sort of some of the lower categories, Red Bull Rookies. I don't know if Junior GP maybe go there. I think they did at one point, but I don't know if they do now, to be completely honest. But yeah, maybe that's part of the problem. They don't get quite as much running on the Bugatti circuit. But yeah, it's not going to cost him too much. Obviously, you know, a bit of a mistake, losing a few points, but I suppose it's better to crash maybe out of like 5th or 6th rather than out of the lead and throwing away 25 points. But it's only his second season, and I'm sure there'll be races where Holgado doesn't score as much. Holgado will probably have races that he crashes out of later on in the year. It's Moto 3. It's not really possible to finish every single race. You know, whether it's your own fault or not, there'll always be a race where you don't score. So another one of the leaders, but pretty much on the opposite end of his Moto3 career compared to Moreira, Masia really looks like he's found a bit of form. We were a bit worried, weren't we, back in Argentina when he sort of crashed out of was second place trying to hunt down his teammate Suzuki, that it's like, oh, it's the old Masia again, making mistakes when he's quick and sometimes being a bit anonymous. But so far this season, he's pretty much been there every weekend, and once again here, managed to stay on. Almost crashed on that last lap with a bit of a rear-end slide, but what did you make of Masia's race and his season so far as a whole?
He's been solid. He's shown a bit of maturity, really. If you look back at every year he's had, and every like all the previous champions, do they have 3 or 4 DNFs this season? In Moto 3, it's nearly inevitable you're going to get taken out or you're going to crash in your group, and Masia has been someone that's probably been on the higher end of crashes throughout the year. Usually when he's quick, slips off with 3 laps to go. Like he's a rider that seems to do that a lot. So the fact that this year he seems so far, bar Argentina, to be getting to the checker flag more. He's going to be again, it's all about being there. You have to be in it to win it, essentially. If you're in that kind of group each week, you're going to take home 12, 16, 20 points a weekend, and 10 races at a time over a full season. That builds, and you get to a Misano or a Japan, and that kind of end of the season where you're not in the last 2 or 3 rounds, but you're nearly there, and you go, right, well, I'm 12 points behind Soho, but I'm 16 points ahead of him, and that's when you need to take the risk then to maybe go, right, I have to win here. But weekends like this, coming home with a solid P3 ahead of Artolo, who's on fire lately with his 2 wins previously. Good result. Was he the top Honda by 12, 13 positions? I don't even know where the next Honda was. So he's outperforming.
His first auto was the next one. I think he crashed on the last lap.
So he crashed out of
been like
P10.
Suzuki, like down in like 15th, something like that.
So basically the only hand in the points, and he was on the podium. And to be honest, if it wasn't for the mistake, he might have had an opportunity to go after Sasaki, but coming out of Museum, small slide, and that really, to be honest, I thought it was going to cost him the podium. I expected Ortola to be to smell blood and go for it into garbage of air, but unfortunately for Ortola, I don't think he was close enough, and I think Messia really recovered well and was strong in the final sector. But again, if he can keep this going, if we're going to Mugello next, I believe it's Germany after that. It's a slightly different calendar this year. So again, his tracks he's been to hundreds of times. He knows these tracks. He should be quick. He has the experience. He is a dark horse for the champion just because of his past. You just don't know if he's going to do it. But he definitely has the experience, and it wouldn't be surprising if we get to November and we're crowning Messia a champion. He's been tipped to be a champion many years. It's just never really clicked. So far this year, he's looking like he's lining up the dots and everything is going his way. So props to him. I'm impressed with his pace, and basically his consistency is his big thing. He's always had the pace, really.
Yeah, he's always had good pace. It's just sometimes he's crashed or sort of dropped off. I have just been thinking that I'm a little bit hesitant about calling him a title contender too quickly, because if we probably think back to basically this round last year, I think he won Le Mans last year. I think he'd also won Austin, so he'd got 2 race wins already that season. Looked like he was going to be fighting for the championship, and where did he actually end up last year? I don't think we have a clue. He was sort of nowhere, wasn't he? So it does. Sometimes he does seem to start seasons quite well. So hopefully he actually does carry it through to the next few rounds. Of course, we've spoke about specific riders quite a lot, but let's speak about a bit more the race of a whole. Obviously, it was by a group of 9 at the front, sort of standard. Moto3 race wasn't too aggressive, actually, although Onshu was in the mix, but he seemed to be a bit more placid today. Didn't seem quite as aggressive, but it was a fairly decent race. But it's just normal at this point, isn't it? The Moto3 massive groups of sort of 9-10 riders.
Yeah, we can, like, if you get a group of 2 or 3 at the front, it's like, oh, this is a much more old school race, like a 1-5 race. But week in, week out, these bikes are so close. It's usually 8-9 KTMs for the one Honda, which is unfortunate at the moment. It'd be nice to see a bit more diversity.
Yeah, Honda are not doing well, are they, at the moment?
Yeah, really, Honda across the board are in a bit of a pit, really. But KTM, given again, it's kind of the opposite of KTM on the rise everywhere else in the world, so it's swings and roundabouts obviously in the sport. But 10 riders today, we had good battling going on throughout it. It was just your standard Moto3 race. Your usual riders there. Your Arctic Gas were P6, P7. You had Moreira there until he crashed. You had all the usual Sasakis and just your standard group, which Ortola now is a part of. Again, P4 for him today. It was a brilliant overall race. You had your usual first 3 or 4 laps, battling. And then again, as of late, it seems to settle down with about 12, 14 laps to go and just start to be a bit more methodical. It hasn't been as crazy recently as it has in the past. Now, get to 3 laps to go and they're sending each other to the wall every corner. Like, they're up inside everyone, they're all over the place again. But it seems to calm down more in the middle. I remember maybe 2019, 2018, where like every lap, every corner, 3 riders wide, and it was just no need for it. Like, and I think some of the riders, the crazier riders, have maybe moved up or moved away, or just a certain group we have at the moment don't seem to be all-out warriors in terms of trying to pass each other everywhere. They seem to be a bit more thinking man riders. So the races are not as action-packed, but there's so much strategy going on. They're still very enjoyable. And of course, no matter who's in the class, last couple of laps of Moto3, it's always action. And it was a good standard race today, but I really did enjoy it. And actually, for once, Moto3 is probably the most calm race, which we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah, I think you probably make a good point that it's maybe the riders are a little bit less crazy. I mean, Munoz is still out, isn't he, with his leg injury? So that's one gone. Obviously, Onshu is a bit more, just seemed a little bit, he seemed a bit off, didn't he, really? He wasn't that fast, particularly sort of slipped back at the end. He wasn't really being too aggressive, but maybe he has been a bit less aggressive this year anyway, especially after the whole Argentina debacle where he sort of just about crashed 3 times in the first lap and then did. So maybe he's had a bit of a talking to. But it does seem like some of the other riders have dropped back. I suppose Darren Binder's gone from the class now as well. So some of you typically aggressive riders, Alcoba's not in there anymore. So that's possibly what it is. It is that maybe some of these more high-profile riders are either out injured or have moved on to other classes at this point. But I guess I'm sure we'll have some more fair and bashing races at some point during the season. But moving on to Moto2 now then, let's get straight into it. Pole position and race winner from the last race, and then pole position of this race, Sam Lowe's not a great start to the first race, was it? Well, the start off the line was pretty good, but he kind of did a Sam Lowe's, you might say.
Yeah, BT Sport bigging him up again, being one of two championship favourites after.
Yeah, I did think that was a bit strange. It's like, yeah, the two title contenders, even though Arbolino was literally tied with Acosta, so it wasn't really.
Yeah,
it made no sense.
It was just British brainwashing again. It was very stupid to be watching. I was sitting there, watching on, wait until he crashes and know what you're going to say. And of course,
Still loves BT Sport, by the way. Guys.
Oh, I have so many gripes with BT Sport just because they're so one-sided and they're just like, they're not clueless, but when it comes to British, they might as well be clueless because they just spout rubbish and they're just so far off in so many estimates. And again today, Sam Lowe's, he's maturing. That race last week, he dominated. He destroyed Acosta. No, he didn't. He pulled away, had slightly more in hand. Acosta thought, this guy's not going to be here for the whole season. I better pay 20 points. That's what happened with BT. Bigged it out of if he lapped the whole field. It's just, they get so ahead of themselves. But back to today's race, he actually, again in qualifying, I believe, if it wasn't for the red flag, we might have seen a bit closer to the front for Acosta. But when Lowe's got pole, wasn't too surprised. He's won here in the past. He won in Jerez in the past. He is quick. I have nothing against Lowe's, really. It's just the whole British saga with him. But gets a good launch today. Probably when he goes for third gear, gets a bit of a wheelie, gets dragged back to third, and at the start of lap 2, crashes. BT Sports said he did nothing wrong, which is, again, wrong. He had a lot more lean angle than the riders in front. It was offline, cold front tyre, and crashed. It was pretty obvious there if you weren't trying to defend your home rider that if that was, we'll say, Acosta who did it, if it was Aldeguer who did it, they would have said exactly what I just said. He comes in with too much lean. When he's braking, the bike is still pointing away from the corner. If you see a still of when the bike crashes, the other two who are slightly in front of him, so he's going to have less lean or more lean than them, it's just clear that he's too hard on the brakes, too much lean. Easy mistake, yes, but it's always Sam that makes these easy mistakes, and for somewhat Dixon as well. And as BT always like to say, oh, he did nothing wrong. Well, he's on his ass in the gravel upside down. He must have done something wrong. Like, you don't just fall off these bikes. But gets back up, gets the bike back, and missed the red flag to get back out on track at the end of the pit lane. Missed by 3.5 seconds. So I did feel for Sam because he would have got back on pole. He would have scored big points. And then with someone else crashing later in the race too, his race weekend could have really been promising. But he ended up scoring 1 point. I wasn't surprised when it crashed. I was waiting for it because it's just your typical BT Sport British bias, bigs up rider, and then he crashes. Jesus, how many years did they do it for John McPhee? Or really have a John McPhee feeling out today, and then lap 3 he's 7th and he crashes out when he's literally doing nothing. So it's, as some outside of Britain, and I can imagine there's other countries around the world that have the British feed, and it's pathetic really how much they big up the riders and defend the British riders when they'll slate anyone else. But yeah, that's just that is how it goes, I suppose.
You've definitely got a strong opinion on that one.
Oh, 100%. I could say a lot more, except I'm trying to be PG with the podcast.
Just trying to be nice. I've heard you say a lot worse, to be fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can't say I disagree. They obviously do defend them quite a lot. Lowe's, obviously, great race in Jerez. He did great pole position once again at a track that he goes well at, like you say. I think ultimately what he was trying to do is trying to set Lopez up for the pass into sort of turn 3, turn 4. He's trying to carry the extra speed, sort of go around the outside, kind of what like Vinales did, I think, later on the the Motogp race. I think that was the aim, but yeah, carried too much speed and down he went. It is a tricky corner, but like you say, it's not unlike him to make a mistake like that. But then, of course, there was a red flag. We may as well talk about the actual red flag itself. Albert Arenas, just coming out of La Chapelle, gets a high side. And unfortunately, the two riders behind him, Gonzalez and Canet, had nowhere to go. Straight into his bike, up over the top. Bike's destroyed, lying in the gravel. Seems like Gonzalez and Arenas were completely fine, escaped unscathed. But Canet did look a bit more hurt. Obviously, everybody was okay in terms of, there's no serious injury, but Canet looked at least winded, maybe injured his leg or something because he was still sat on the ground. Don't know if you've heard anything. I know he went off to the medical centre, but I've not seen anything about it. But nasty little crash, and we're very fortunate that everybody got away with it relatively unscathed.
On the Canet side, I believe he was holding his left ankle from the shots we saw
Yeah,
of
that's
him.
what it looked like.
It looked like it was an ankle. His crash was probably the worst of everyone. So obviously, Arenas has the high side. Gonzalez goes into the back of him. He seems to get away lightly, but the bike comes straight in front of Canet, who T-bones it, and it's literally just a flip. The bike flips, and I don't know if the bike came down on top of him, because the camera angle is quite hard because the bike is kind of blocking where you would see if he was hitting it. So it's quite hard to see if there was a collision between him and the bike, but he was in the gravel for a lot longer than the other two. The other two were already behind the barriers by the time they got kind of into the back of the truck off to the medical centre. I wouldn't be surprised to see he's fractured his ankle or something, because he does come down quite hard. You're kind of hitting fourth gear coming out of there at that speed, so you're travelling at a bit of speed. So unfortunate, big crash. And to be honest, right, with the stewards, I was kind of hoping, one, it wouldn't need to be red flagged, and two, if they were going to red flag it, they wouldn't wait till the riders got back to the exact same position.
Yeah, that was awful. They were literally going through the turn when it got red flagged.
So it was just like,
I know you try and leave it, because if they'd all been able to walk away, they would have been able to carry that race on. But when there's someone still sat there and you're going over the line and it's in sector 1, you need to, or sector 2, beginning of sector 2, they should have brought the flag out a lot earlier.
Realistically, they should have had the red flags out by the time that the boys are coming up to go down into La Chapelle. So at the Michelin bridge there, the red flag should have been there immediately. They shouldn't have went through there that speed, because like, it's the natural line coming out of La Chapelle to get ready for Museum is you drift to the left side of the track, which is where the crash has just happened. So again, it's quite like we saw in all three classes moments for riders there, and we got a crash in Motor 2, and there easily could have been someone headed exactly a beeline for where the marshals were and the downed riders. So not great stewarding. I understand why they did it, but again, it just seems like they made a bit of a balls of it. And speaking of making balls of it, there was a BMW X5 on the track during FP1 in Motor 3. What in the name of God was that all about? Forgot to put that into the notes, actually. But
yeah, actually, I did forget all about that.
No idea. Coming through the double last, we'll just cover it now quickly, I suppose. The double right-hander at the end of the track, FP1 Motor 3, and there's an X5 driving along what would be the full Le Mans circuit, kind of coming through the fences. Don't actually know why he was on track, or he or she was on track. I
believe they were ferrying VIPs from one side of the truck to the other. I think that's what they were doing, but they decided to do it during a live session and not between.
Idiotic. Absolutely idiotic. VIPs, like, what? Just do one with that shite. Like, there's no need to be bringing that risk. Then I heard people saying, well, it's a slow corner. It's not really. It's a double apex corner, and you're coming in.
It is. If you end up out there.
Yeah, exactly. If you crash coming into the first part of it, you're going to get to
early. It's going quick, isn't it?
Exactly. So. Like, you could get very close to it, and like, there's absolutely no excuse for that. That is terrible. Huge mistake from the marshals. Huge oversight from whoever let it happen, and just disgraceful, really, to see a BMW X5 in the gravel trap while an ongoing session going on. But back, I suppose, to the red flag. It was delayed to about 10 minutes after the crash, and then for another 6 minutes it got delayed, so it gave the likes of Sam Lowe's the opportunity to potentially get back, and unfortunately does just miss out. But so far we don't believe Canet is too injured. Arenas was back in the pits, and so was Gonzalez. They both watched the race from the pit, so please God, everything's okay with Canet with his leg. He does look like he was trying to maybe get his left boot off and was holding his ankle. Maybe he's got a whack, hopefully, a bit of bruising. 3 weeks off before Mugello, he should be fine, but just praying really that he doesn't have any fractures or breaks, because it's still very early in his season.
Yeah, Canet, he can't catch a break, can he, bless him? Well, hopefully he doesn't get a break this time. But I didn't really think that before I said it, but he's got no luck. Unfortunately, once again, not his fault. I know he's made a lot of mistakes, and I suppose you could argue that it was his error in a way that he didn't qualify too well. But yeah, it's very unfortunate getting collected in somebody else's accident. But then, like you say, there was obviously 3 laps hadn't been completed yet, which means full restart, and most importantly for Sam Lowe's, I guess, like you were mentioning, him trying to get the bike fixed. You don't need to get back within 5 minutes when it's a full restart. It's like as if nothing ever happened. So they managed to get that Mark BDS bike back. I was actually very surprised about how little it was damaged. I don't know about you, but he crashed at still a very high speed into a gravel trap. Usually that is a recipe for a destroyed bike, but in fairness, there was only sort of screen damage, bit of handlebar damage, kind of more what you'd expect for a lower speed incident. So they all managed to go back to the pits. There was obviously probably about 10-15 minutes in total, wasn't there, before pit lane opened for 1 minute, but Lowe's didn't quite make it, missed it by about 3 seconds. So he had to start from the back of the grid. But straight away then, it was a completely new race. Forget everything that happened before. Obviously, there were the 3 riders missing and Sam at the back, so no one on pole position. Obviously, nobody in the other positions. I don't know about Borja Gomez, actually, because he had an issue on the sighting lap and had to start at the back of the grid for the first start because he was late back to the grid because he had an issue with his bike. I don't know whether he then got to take his normal grid spot.
By race, it's a restart, so it's a full restart, so there should be no issues, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know it doesn't make much difference, but I just thought about it, and it doesn't matter where you're on the grid, the rules are important to know. But that was a completely new start to the race, and, well, Arbolino, he got off the line well. Obviously, he was leading the initial one as well, kind of in part thanks to Lopez making a couple of mistakes. There was almost contact actually between the two on the run down towards the chicane in that first race. Arbolino coming across the front of Lopez, almost contact there. But Arbolino once again got off the line really well, took the lead, pulled away, and that was pretty much it for him, wasn't it? Fantastic race from Arbolino.
Yeah, I actually kind of felt from with the red flag because he had done all the hard work in the first start, got a bit of clear track and looked like he was pushing on. And then I saw the red flag and I goes, oh no, I always feel for someone who's done their job, got to the front and got a bit of clear track when there's red flag, because you'll know for a fact they're going to go, oh, I'm going to have to do it all again. I guarantee someone's going to be after copying on how I took the line through this corner, how I approached turn 1. You learn from race starts, and every time a red flag comes out, the second start, it's never as one-sided, if we'd say, for the rider who's leading. They have kind of shown their card at that point, so I was expecting him maybe to struggle a bit more, but he got to the front, had the pace, and made it a good day for one side of the Mark VDS camp. But again, one of the championship favourites. He is now leading by 25 points over Acosta, so he has a race win advantage, and he's been quick. He's was 4 podiums out of 5 races. He missed out last time out, so he is.
Didn't he not stuff in his third last time out?
Maybe it wasn't last time out, but I believe the stat was he had 4 podiums out of 5, and I think he missed out once, but I could be misquoting that. But regardless, he's been ridiculously quick every round. He's been consistent, and the fact that Acosta ended up on his head in the gravel again 2 years running at Le Mans, while actually both times in P2 actually he crashed up behind Augusto Fernandez last year's teammate, and then this year chasing down Arbolino, ended up on his head. So maybe Arbolino is the main man for the championship. I definitely think he's the main man of that team for the championship. I don't see Sam putting a flame to either of them for a full season. I think there will be weekends like Le Mans could have been, and like Jerez, of course, but over a 20 race season, I just see the Spanish and the Italian having more for Sam, really. But again, I could see him kind of bridging a gap. If we get to midway season and he's 25-30 points ahead, that's pretty big. Like in Moto 2, usually you see in Moto 2, like you don't see Moto 3 where Agata won today, he's 7th next week. It's usually like, oh well, he won today, he was 3rd yesterday, and like it kind of is a consistent. Usually it's a bit more consistent Moto 2. So if Arbolino keeps putting himself on the front row, on the second row, getting podiums, getting wins when he can, there's no reason why he can't be the 23 champion. And I'd like to see him win it. I actually am quite a fan of Arbolino, and he said during the race, well, after the first few laps in race 2, started to feel a bit tired, thinks he's coming down with something maybe. So even more of a applauded for him for getting that win and showing his pace even if he wasn't feeling 100% fit.
Yeah, it was a great race for him. I do disagree slightly about them not having weekends where they're a bit more poor, because in Moto 2, if you're having a bit of an off weekend, you do sometimes take the 6th and 7th places. You see that quite regularly in these championship hunts. I don't know what you're saying. Usually, they're up the front.
I kind of go off the Remy Gardner year and Raul Fernandez when it was just them two. That was kind of the way I was thinking of it.
That was so much better than everybody else. But yeah, I think actually sort of linking it back to the Gardner Fernandez, I think you're kind of right in that aspect that we've got our championship challengers now. It's either Acosta or Arbolino winning this championship. Costly for Acosta to crash here at Le Mans, but easily done into Museum Corner. It was a touch wide, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I think he just maybe braked a bit too late and was risking a bit too much. Obviously saw his championship rival leading the race. He wanted to catch him up. Ironically enough, had he not done that, Arbolino made a mistake like about a lap later anyway, and he would have been right on the back of him, perhaps even in front of him, with the amount of time that he lost to Salach behind. So I don't know whether maybe it was because he was looking at his board, his dashboard, being told that Acosta was out that he made that mistake, and we haven't actually seen it, I don't think, but there was a lap where he lost like 0.9 in like a sector, so obviously he did make some sort of error. But costly mistake for Acosta, but he's only 25 points behind. There is plenty of races for it to still be made up, and it'd be very unlikely that there's not at least one race where Arbolino either scores slightly poorly or crashes himself. So I'm sure the championship is still between those two, but at this point, I do struggle to see anybody else. Lopez mainly, it may be, because Lopez was still on the podium this weekend. Lopez has been pretty consistent, so he maybe could be, but I think the Bosco Sciorra is probably what's going to let him down a little bit at some rounds. But I can't see anybody outside of those three winning the championship at all, not even Canet and riders like that. I'll see Lowe's maybe winning a couple more races, but probably not a championship charge.
Yeah, I do reckon the Bosco Sciorra chassis isn't there. Both riders today had no edge grip at a track that you wouldn't say you spend a lot of time on the tyre. It's kind of a stop and go circuit.
Makes me wonder whether they didn't have new tyres for the restart.
Potentially, yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
That was
because it's the same team, so
yeah, it was definitely worth mentioning. But the fact that they just seem to have so little edge grip and very little drive grip, and they both kind of struggled.
Yeah,
I'm just starting to think Calix versus Bosco Sciorra, regardless of how good Lopez and Aldeguer could be over season, I still just think the law of averages will level it out, and the Bosco Sciorra won't be quicker in the most part of the season. So I just think that might take its toll on Lopez if we were to go down to a championship battle.
Yeah, I think you're right, but there will also be weekends where the Bosco Sciorra is better. I think tracks like Catalunya and Assen, I think you actually probably want to be on the Bosco Sciorra rather than the Calix. Silverstone is another good one. The high-speed circuits, the Bosco Sciorra has always seemed very good. Actually, Mugello, it's been very good there in the past. I mean, it was a long time ago, but I don't know if you remember when Iannone used to turn up there on the speed up, as it was called then, he'd just clear off. So it's got some good pedigree around some of these high-speed European tracks. So maybe we're being a bit too harsh on Lopez, but yeah, I think overall the Bosco Sciorra probably is going to let him down over the season. But moving on to MotoGP then, obviously we had the sprint and the main race, but I think we're going to sort of amalgamate them into one this time because I think that worked better. We tried a little bit of that last time and it did seem to flow a little bit better to just talk about it as a whole. Brad Binder, obviously we said last week, he was becoming a proper championship contender at this point. I finally believe in the KTM improvement. I've been a bit sceptical. You've been on board the whole time, haven't you, Dill, really, since the beginning of the season, thinking that the bike's been pretty good. But I was pretty sceptical until last weekend. But Binder, once again, looking fantastic on Saturday. Really good ride from him.
Yeah, I've been probably wishing the KTM 2 kicker rather than actually believing it, probably. I've still had my doubts because every time they just seem to end up producing a bike each year that does make a step and then also make a step backwards. So you end up with this wide range of where KTM is brilliant on its race tyres, it's brilliant over a race run. One lap it's terrible, or it doesn't go well in the wet, or there's always one little catch with the KTM. And this year, so far, out of our first 5 rounds, we have seen them quick everywhere. Except obviously pre-season, but again, by the look of it, they probably weren't going all out in pre-season. They were probably just holding back and maybe just trying to dial it in and not really go for the glory runs and putting a lap time in. So the fact that Brad Binder is third in the championship, he's 13 points off. He probably, I'd say he could have been closer to Bezzecchi if he didn't have the incident in the starter race too. He was magnificent in the sprint, got his way to second. Unfortunately for him, Jorge Martin had made the break. But the fact he's so close in the championship, he seems very consistent. He doesn't make many mistakes. He's made one in Texas in a weird, bumpy, weird track. He's not a crasher, which is the main thing. Pecco's crashed again today in the main race. You look at Bezzecchi, is he ready to do a full season of 40 races to go head-to-head versus all these guys? You don't know yet. Miller probably is going to have more of these weekends, I'm afraid to say. Binder versus Pecco. I'm saying it here now. That's probably the way it's going to go down. Unfortunately, Aprilia's don't seem to be able to do it on a Sunday. If we raced directly after FP1, Aprilia would probably run away with the championship. But there's all these little asterisks next to other people and other bikes just to say why they won't be there. Funny how I didn't even mention Marc Marquez or Yamaha or Honda in that little segue there. But Binder
is... Marc Marquez has only done like 2 rounds so far, so he is a bit of a disadvantage in terms of points. And it's not like he scored many in those 2 rounds either.
As we'll get to in a minute. But Binder, magnificent. No surprise anymore from him, especially on a Saturday when he's so aggressive. I do expect him to win many more sprint races, and I do actually see him winning some feature races as well, the full length races. I actually think he does have the pace. He's just been a bit unlucky. The way today's races went, maybe if he didn't get punted in lap 1 into La Chapelle, he might have been able to pick up the pieces. Would he had Bezecchi's pace? I don't know. Bezecchi just came out of nowhere at that pace. It was ridiculous how quick he was on his own, and it shows that he's really getting to grips with that bike. But for Binder, he just needs to keep making a step in qualifying. If he can keep keeping himself towards the front of the grid, there's no reason why he can't win the sprint on a Saturday. He's just so good off the line. He's so aggressive, and if he can keep winning them, keep putting the pressure on in the full length races, it won't be long before we'll be talking him leading, and can he then do a full season. So, huge fan of Brad for many years, ever since he won from last in 2016. Such a talent, and I think we're finally seeing what a good bike under Brad Binder means for him in his championship challenge.
Yeah, I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head there. He's going to be there week in, week out. To be honest, obviously he was unfortunate to get involved in the weird incident with Alex Marquez. I mean, it's a bit of a Alex Marquez trait to pull a bit of a silly move at any point in the race. Doesn't have to be an opener. Obviously, it was unfortunate to get involved with that. But again, he qualified 10th. So you put yourself in that position. Obviously, you can't really afford to qualify that badly. It actually seems the KTM gets off the line so well that you almost can. But this time it's bit him. Obviously, we saw back in Argentina, for example, he qualified really poorly there in the sprint race. Wins the race. Great start. But that happens once in a blue moon. You don't get up to like 4th place in one corner most of the time. If it opens up for you, then it opens up for you, and it can happen. But on the whole, it doesn't. And what happened to him the next day? He had contact and down he went. I don't think he was at fault for it, but again, back in the pack, these things happen. So I think that's what's letting him down is his qualifying. And we can clearly see that actually it's not the bike anymore. Always was sort of a KTM trait that it couldn't qualify, a bit like Suzuki, but Miller is there week in, week out at the front qualifying. So I would say that's Binder's biggest weakness. And but overall, his races have been pretty good. He's had 2 DNFs, obviously, in the full-length races, but arguably one wasn't his fault, although obviously it was down to his qualifying. And the other one was Austin, which is a tricky little one. So, I mean, he could have been leading the championship had he not had those 2 incidents. So I think, yeah, he's definitely looking good, but he does need to work on the Saturday. Now, of course, we've both mentioned Miller a little bit in this because, well, you really can't when you're talking about his teammate. Nil points for both races for Jack Miller. It's, well, I don't mean to be harsh, but it's a Miller weekend, isn't it? Written all over it. Fantastic qualifying pace. Obviously, we've not had the sprints before this, but how many times have we seen Miller be up there, qualify really well, be running really high in the race and just fall off way, way too many times? Doesn't matter what bike he's on, it's always happened. So, yeah, he's showing that maybe over one lap he's got more pace than Binder, but Binder definitely showing that he can at least stay on the bike.
It's such a difficult one with Jack because he left the Ducati team. Everybody tipped him to go backwards and be like the second fiddle to Binder, and he's actually shown that he's somewhat of a match for Brad. Maybe doesn't have the complete package. He doesn't seem to be able to manage a tyre. He doesn't seem to be able to push through issues the way Brad can. When Brad hits an issue, it's just like, well, yeah, he puts it to the back of his mind, all right, the front is not feeling great, I'll just ride around it. Don't think Jack has that ability. Made a stupid tyre decision based off what Michelin kind of recommended in the sprint. He went with a medium front, even though all weekend he was ridiculously quick on a soft front. That was his biggest mistake. He did seem to have some issue on the full race on Sunday. Started well, made a break for it, got to the front, and then his pace just kind of plateaued. Then eventually people caught him, passed him, and he went backwards until about 8-9 laps to go. Decides to do his fast lap of the race, and then, as usually does happen, a couple of laps later he does slide off in P7, I believe it was, in turn 4. So it's a Jack Miller weekend. He's slightly off the boil in the race, even though he was ridiculously quick on Friday. Nobody understands why yet. We haven't really heard what the issue was in the full race yet. He did go with a soft front. Maybe temperatures came up, didn't work for him. I know Marcus went a bit hard, but not many people were struggling as much as Jack was with the soft front. So it's interesting to find out what the issue was. It is common. Michelin have dud tires, so maybe that could be it. It's not it wouldn't be the first time someone had a dud tire. So maybe that was it. Maybe we're being a bit harsh on Jack, but 2 crashes in 2 races when he was tipped to have the best race pace on both of them. It's kind of Jack Miller in a nutshell, really, and I'm afraid to say that he's going to have to bounce back in Mugello, and Mugello isn't really a Jack Miller track. He was never amazing there, the Ducati, even the Ducati is designed for it. It's all about corner speed, letting the brake off. There's not many places where you can stuff a KTM down the inside. So it's kind of all falling apart for Jack at the wrong time, I believe. It could be difficult in the next few rounds after this weekend, just because it's going to take a bit of a knock to his confidence, especially with everyone bigging him up. Had a great arrest, very good pace early in the season, and now just a little off weekend, even though, again, he showed pace, just wasn't able to put it together.
Yeah, it's kind of the story of his career to an extent in MotoGP. He's just has the pace, but unfortunately he kind of cracks or makes a mistake. It did seem like he had some sort of issue, at least at the early parts of... Well, actually, to start with, in the main race, he was looking good. Then he seemed to struggle a lot, but then, like you say, he did his fastest lap a few laps before he crashed, so it's weird, because usually if you had a problem, you wouldn't ever really get back up to the same pace, especially if it was a tyre issue, like a dud tyre, so... I don't know, very strange. I guess we'll find out as the days pass, I suppose. I guess that's the one issue, really, with recording pretty quickly after the race. You don't always know what's sort of gone on. You don't always hear everything that the riders have had to say. So Pecco Bagnaia, another interesting weekend for him. He seemed to struggle quite a bit overall this weekend, if I'm being completely honest, especially in practice. He had to sort of go through... did he have to go through Q1? He was outside of the top after FP1, but in practice 2, whatever it's called, I think he did end up getting in. But, you know, he's the championship leader, the current champion. You expect him always to be in the top 10 in every session. But in FP1, he wasn't, for example, looked a bit uncomfortable. In the sprint as well, obviously didn't look that great. Obviously, he was on pole position, so, you know, that's worth noting. Nothing wrong with his pace, actually, once he got it working, but seemed a little bit weak off the start in the sprint, struggled a bit. Obviously had some hard battles with Marc Marquez in that one there. The stewarding obviously being I think correct in that situation, but kind of going back on what they'd said, because if you didn't know, they told the riders before this weekend, or it might have been on Friday, that now if you have contact with someone, it's a drop. When you're making a pass, it's a drop 1 spot, and if you knock somebody else off, you get along that penalty. Well, there was plenty of passes with contact, especially in the sprint race, and there was no penalties given out, which I'm happy about. Don't get me wrong, because I don't want to see penalties for that kind of stuff. It was great racing, but surely you can't say that you're going to give out penalties for it and then not give out penalties for it. It makes no sense. I think they went they did the right call in the end, but then they literally did the exact opposite of what they said was going to happen, which is very, very bizarre. But I just thought I'd mention that there. I don't know if you have anything to add about that particular area of the weekend, the stewarding.
I believe they've kind of shot themselves in the foot, because in the sprint race, there's so many collisions, they can't actually realistically give a penalty to drop 1 position, because it would just be dangerous. If you give, well, just for argument's sake, Alex Marquez in the middle of the pack drop 1 position, and already you're not. First off, he's not going to be looking at his dash. He's going to be so focused on hitting his markers, defending, attacking, staying alive in the race. The sprint races can be so chaotic that there's so many little mistakes and contacts here and there. The stewards will be giving out penalties all right, left, right and centre, to the point where we just get messy. So I think they've kind of cornered themselves with the rules there, that the fact that they go, well, we have to give a penalty for that, but in the sprint race it happens so much as they just can't cope with it, and they kind of leave it slide. So again, questionable stewarding. Didn't have any issue really in the race too much. I believe Alex Marquez was kind of okay. I think Alex Marquez might get a long lap for the next one after what he did to on the opening lap. I don't think him crashing out of the race is enough. I think if you are going to go by the law of the law. You have to kind of penalise him regardless of what the rest of his result ended up to be. So again, stewarding questionable. From what I heard from the meeting with Freddie Spencer, the riders disagreed with Freddie. Freddie disagreed with the riders. Nobody left happy. Everybody left a bit odd.
I've heard that one before.
So yeah. Stewarding corner as always is a bundle of joy. So on to Mugello.
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that whilst we're talking about the little battle with Marquez and Bagnaia, because, like we say, there was nothing wrong with anything that happened, but when the stewards actually said they were going to think about penalties for that kind of thing and then don't, it kind of just goes against what they're saying, but obviously good to see that they didn't. They seem to be... The actual calls weren't too bad this weekend. It was just the fact that they'd already said that they were going to
ignore their own rules, really, basically.
Yeah, which maybe it's because they realised their rules were stupid. I don't know, but... Like to see how it actually was. I like to see no penalties unless necessary. Obviously, there were some others, but we'll get onto them in a little bit. So Bagnaia, interesting weekend. May as well talk about his actual race as well. Obviously, the sprint, he managed to best Marc Marquez, which is easier said than done. Although I suppose Marc Marquez is on a tricycle whilst he's on on a Ducati, blasting past him. But obviously, in the main race, weird incident with Bagnaia and Viñales. Viñales goes to the pass into the first part of the Blue S after a very, very interesting half a lap for Viñales. He was rapid, he was making passes. It looked like 2017, like first couple of rounds, Yamaha Viñales. Like he looked confident, he looked like he could put the bike where he wanted to. He could make these passes. He goes underneath Bagnaia, runs a bit wide, but that's kind of what happens when you make that pass. Bagnaia tries to cut back underneath him. Didn't really leave him any space because you've got to flip the bike back over for the next corner. Bagnaia virtually alongside him, so as Viñales flicks the bike over, contact, Viñales actually has a tank slapper, has to get out of that. Bagnaia is actually still on board at this point, but because of the tank slapper that Viñales had, he had to pick the bike up straight into the side of Bagnaia. Both went into the gravel, both went down. Bit of a punch up in the gravel as well. It was strange that because you don't usually see Viñales getting in a punch up with people. You don't see Bagnaia getting a punch up with people. But a bit of a punch up between the two of those two after that incident. So don't know what you make of that one, but it was a bit needless from Bagnaia. I did think he was considering he was leading the championship, he was putting a lot on the line, especially in the sprint as well. He was like really, really going for it against people when he had a lot more to lose than they did.
Yeah, it's in the sprint, right? I felt like that he just didn't have the speed, and then when he ended up getting a bit of clear track in P2. Or P3, he managed to just put the hammer down and make his package work for him. In the race, he seemed desperate in the full race. I don't understand why. Has a lead. Bezzecchi wasn't ahead of him. Binder wasn't ahead of him. Marquez is ahead of him. Like the people that were in around him, Maverick had passed him. He's not a championship threat. Just needless, really. We saw it later in the race from Jorge Martin and Marquez did the exact same thing, but they both survived because Marquez was given the room. As I saw at that time, I called it that it was 100% Bagnaia's fault. Puts his bike in a position where an unsighted rider is going to come back to that position. Poor mental racecraft there, in my opinion, from the bus stop. They both blamed each other. Pecco realises another 25 points or 20 points has gone a begging. Maverick saw his first chance of a win on an Aprilia. In the gravel, I could really see that they both felt that they had been the other rider was at fault. The pushing and shoving, it just showed the emotion of Pecco's like, not again, I haven't crashed again, he's knocked me off. And then Maverick's like, can't believe this fool turned in on me, I could have won today. And you just saw that kind of boil over in the gravel. I was gutted, really, that Maverick crashed. The fact that Pecco went down was his own fault. He put himself in a position he didn't need to be in. You don't need to battle Maverick there. You leave Maverick go. You could probably pass him into garage there in the next lap. Maverick by no means is prime Rossi or Alex Barros on the brakes. You just need better race management in that position. And it's 2 years in a row now where Pecco has ended up DNFing from the French GB for his own mistake, really. Last year he looked at the big screen and fell off. This year he battled Viñales as if it was the last lap for the championship on round 5 when he already has a big lead and has already made mistakes. There was no need for it. It's starting to feel now like Fabio's championship winning year, where he had the arm pump in her red, he had the Catalunya, the chest protector. It's each week there seems to be something going wrong for Pecco that's just like, oh, if he could just sort these out, he'd be miles ahead. So for us, it's good, keeps the championship open. But Jesus, Ducati will be pulling their hair out that Pecco isn't 100 points clear already in this championship.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. I think the main difference between the Fabio comparison is that these are all Bagnaglia's fault, whereas pretty much none of the things that happened to Fabio were his fault. So it's a little bit different there, but definitely vibes of that. He's clearly the fastest, but he's only got 1 point lead. But then you can also look at it like literally he's DNF'd 3 of the main races, and there's only been like 5 or 6 of them, and he's still leading the championship. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I don't think it was a mistake, particularly to fight back, because fair enough, as a race, it's a bit, silly to say, oh yeah, don't fight the guy back. But it was just the way he did it so close. Like, he didn't leave Vinales any room to actually change direction of the bike when obviously he was going to do that because the next corners are left. So he wasn't going to continue turning right into Bagnaia. So it's one of those things where I've said it before, especially, said it about real life events, said it about events in games as well, where people just they risk too much when there's no need to be that close to him. If you want to try and get around the outside of him there, just give him a bit more space to actually turn it, and you might have just about done it. But it was a shame because I actually think Vinales might have had the pace there. He was really looking quick, and I've not seen Vinales like that, like I say, since like 2017. So he was looking good, and I think he genuinely could have won that race had he not had that incident. But I guess we'll never know. The resident Vinales supporter on this podcast, I'm always saying he's going to win each race, and the one time it looked like he actually might, he has an incident, but at least he was being aggressive, I suppose. He's usually a little bit too timid. So another Ducati rider that actually ended up doing pretty well. Obviously, we've talked about Bezzecchi a little bit, and we'll talk about Bezzecchi a little bit more later on. But Martin, the winner of the sprint, second place in the main race, as he finally got it together. He's finally doing well. I mean, Martin's not a million miles out of the championship either, and being on the same bike as Bagnaia and, based on junior career, probably seeming like a faster rider than Bagnaia. It's just, does he still have a chance? Has he finally clicked? Will getting a sprint win, a second place in the race, finally have built his confidence back up again? Because he's basically been crashing since Bagnaia took him out at Qatar last year. It's basically crash for him since then.
He's P4 in the championship, 14 points behind. Now, again, Pecco's crashed so much that he shouldn't be that close, but if he just doesn't show up some weeks, it's very annoying, and I'd say it's a massive head scratcher for Ducati why he doesn't, and probably the reason why he's still in Pramac and not on the big red factory bike. So, since he came into GP, he had a very good rookie year. Then he was tipped to take Miller's seat. Then Bastianini takes the rug over from underneath him. Then he's all about, well, I want a factory bike, I'm going off the Yamaha. Then Yamaha nosedive into the ground, and then he's in this kind of no man's land of, well, I'm on a second tier Ducati team. I don't see an opportunity into the factory team at the moment. Any manufacturer could go to, not really, without going backwards for a paycheck. So I think that kind of situation has kind of screwed his head for a while. And I think maybe this year he's just starting to realise, well, I'll just work with the tools I have and kind of show people why I'm an ex-Moto 3 champion and why I'm tipped to be a very, very stellar GP rider in future. And I think he has the pace. There's never been a question of it. He does have racecraft. He had a very good battle today with Marquez. Managed in the end to get the pass and pull it down. If he didn't get P2 today, Marquez somehow got the end, I probably would have criticised him for not getting over the line. The fact that Marquez has come back for injury, Marquez is on a pretty average Honda, and the fact that Martin is on such a pace advantage on the bike and he couldn't get the move done, I would have been a bit disappointed. But even though Mark crashes as he passes him, he still got the move done. There was no way Mark was coming back. So the fact he does actually get the win in the battle against Mark was good. But it's still too early to say for Martin because he has these rounds where he's really quick, and then we go to Mugello next week and he could be behind his teammates. He could be like the fifth Ducati. So I don't know about Martin. I have been a huge fan in the past with him, but I have question marks really. Can he do it for a full year? Is the bottom line really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure whether it's Martin or whether it's just Pramac that have these weekends, because Zarco's the same. He's there one weekend, and I mean they were 2-3 today, and they were like, there's weekends where they're both nowhere, and there was weekends where Petrucci was nowhere, and there was weekends where Miller and Bagnaia were nowhere when they were there, and it does seem like when it's working for them, they're there, but I've never seen a Pramac rider be there week in, week out. So, it does make you question whether, I don't mean it as a particular slight at them, but I just mean as a satellite team in general, it's more difficult to be there week in, week out, because Bezecchi's been the same, really. Bezecchi, he won in Argentina, basically not really been anywhere since then, and then wins again here. Obviously got the podium also, I think, in Portimao. But it's difficult for the satellite riders. I think the factory teams definitely had the advantage in terms of being there week in, week out. We've seen that with the KTM riders. We've seen that with Bagnaia. He's there. Bastianini would be there if he hadn't have broke his shoulder. So, I think it will be tough for Martin on the satellite equipment. But like you say, he's in a bit of a difficult situation because there's rumours he's signed for Yamaha. Then, is he going to be stuck in Pramac? Because there's no way he's getting up to the factory team unless, Bastianini doesn't recover well from his injury, which obviously you don't want to see, but that's the only path you can really see him getting into the factory team anytime soon. So, it's a bit of a tough one for Martin. But of course, he spent most of his race battling with Marc Marquez. He was finally back after the first round of the season, where of course he broke his thumb. Strange to see so long out for a broken thumb. I've seen people race the next day with broken fingers and stuff before, so obviously, he's taken all the precautions, and I don't blame the guy because he's learnt his lesson. He knows what it's like when you come back too early and you re-injure it. It basically ends your career almost. So I have no doubt that there's a reason why he's being careful. But finally back and immediately impressive, just like he was in Portimao. He was on pole in Portimao, second here. It does seem like he can get the Honda actually on the pace, at least for a lap. And then in the race, he can just do it. He just basically proved he's so much better than all the other riders. It's which is no slight on the others, but it's unbelievable. He's such a good rider. He's so aggressive in both the sprint and the main race, and he was fair in all of them as well. Aggressive but fair. Didn't bash anybody out the way, so he's kind of brushed off the critics almost from Portimao, where obviously he caused the incident. And to be honest, that was just an accident, and unfortunately he collected other people. It wasn't like he was doing a silly move, but great to see Mark back, and he was phenomenal as always.
Mark is so good. You actually, a lot of times, you think, how good is this class of GP riders in the field? Like, you look back that he went head-to-head with Rossi, he went head-to-head with Lorenzo. We know how good them riders are. We know how good Mark is. They're all in this very close bracket of the best to ever have done it. You can throw Stoner in there as well, obviously, slightly out of that era. But then you see Mark being that good on that bike against them lot, and you're kind of going, is Pecco really I know in the modern day we don't have aliens because the bikes are so close, because the tires are a limiting factor, because the ECU being the same across the board is a limiting factor. Every team has somewhat factory equipment. You don't get the aliens anymore of the Rossis, Peugeots, Lorenzos and stuff like that. But you do wonder, how good is Pecco if on Ducatis, all Ducati can only beat him barely, when Marquez is on a bike that has been slated to be one of the worst bikes he's ever ridden. So then you start to think, well, we know Marquez is a step above, but how big is that step? Is it 2 or 3 steps? It's just so many, because he's been in and out, injured, broken arm, broken thumb. The Honda's terrible. New frame. There's just so much going on Honda. It's so hard to pick through the noise to see where is he at as a rider compared to the rest of them, and where is the Honda at compared to the Ducati, the KTM, the Aprilia and such. So he's doing amazing. 3 crashes this weekend. It was terrible to see him slide out in a museum in the last couple of laps. I think 2.5, 3 laps to go, he crashed out. So it was just one too far. The whole reason I go back to the Martin, where I would have been disappointed if he didn't pass him, is the fact that Marcus was coming out of the corner having moments. He was on the limit on the way in. The front was moving. The back was coming out of line. Everything. He was overriding it. He was dragging that bike forward. And the fact that Martin should have been ahead probably a couple of times just shows again how good Mark's racecraft is, battling the likes of Rossi's and Dovi's for the years. He's one of the best ever to go at it in terms of head-to-head. So I think a lot of the modern riders aren't as good as that. They might be quicker than him on their day, but I don't think they have that Rossi Marquez tactician about them. So really, hats off to Marcus today. It's good to see him back. 3 weeks off, it'll do well for him and Honda to go through the data of the Calix frame. He did crash it, I'm afraid, but he did say it turns better, not as good as the brakes, but it didn't look that way in the race. He was making up all his time again on the brakes. So for Marquez, just needs to reevaluate now, settle on whether the Calix frame is the way to go. If he can just start to find a bit of Honda performance, we could see him winning races again. And after that performance today, wouldn't be surprised if he wins this season. Maybe even a couple of race times when we go to Sachsenring.
I think it'd be very surprising if he didn't win at Sachsenring. I think he'll absolutely wipe the floor with them.
Especially with the Calix frame if it turns well, because that's literally an oval.
Yeah, I mean, Le Mans has been a decent track for him in the past, I think. So, yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense that he's there. But the bike is bad, but I think it kind of shows that, like, if you're good enough, a point and squirt bike, you can sort of force to stop quicker and really try and turn it. Like, with his talent, he can kind of make up for the areas where it's lacking, because it's still, at the end of the day, all right, it's not got the power of the Ducati, but it still is a stop it in the corner and turn it and squirt it out bike. So I feel like with his style, he can force that to fit. It's a bit different to the Yamaha, for example, where that just doesn't work with that bike. So I think that's why you see Marquez is so good. But I think, yeah, obviously he is an alien. You know, he was part of that sort of... I know he wasn't part of the alien era. That was obviously like Pedrosa, Lorenzo, Rossi, Stoner. But he was as good as those riders, so he's that talent level. But, yeah, I don't think the current riders are as good as that. I don't think we've seen... I think Acosta maybe is the only rider that is like that. I know obviously he's not in MotoGP right now, but he's the only kind of alien, I guess you could say, in terms of the way he's gone through the ranks. I mean, that's the kind of vibe I get from it anyway. But I guess you just don't get that anymore because it's so close. But even still, he's proved that he is so much better, and it was a shame for him to lose in the way that he did. Obviously, just trying to get the cutback on Martin, and the bike was already on the limit. But I suppose he's not fighting for a championship, so it was better to try and get the second place, I guess. But I suppose he probably would have been better off settling for third. But Marc Marquez doesn't settle. Definitely doesn't settle unless it's for the championship. But Zarco ended up getting on the podium in the end. Still no race win for Zarco, but in fairness, nobody was touching Bezzecchi today after the carnage. But a podium at his home race, he's got to be pretty happy with that one, just behind his teammate Martin as well. So you could argue both of them pretty much got the most out of that Pramac Ducati that you're going to get. Good race from Zarco. Sure, it was lovely for him in the home crowd, and to be sort of the number one French guy at the moment. You know, Quartararo's not finishing anywhere. He can't do anything on the Yamaha. So for Zarco, kind of like the Tech 3 days where he was the top French again now. You know, it must be lovely for him at the home Grand Prix to be back on the podium.
Yeah, obviously not his first Premier Class podium. He was on the podium in 17. Came P2 that day behind Maverick Vinales on the Tech 3. Good weekend for him. Nothing amazing. Again, I'll give him his plaudits. He got 2 solid finishes. Kind of lucked into a podium. I don't like to say that because he was in the top 10 consistently, but you had the likes of Marini, Alex Marquez, who were ahead of him. They crashed out. You had Pecco and you had Vinales crash out. That's 4. You had Jack Miller. That's 5. You go
Marquez 6.
Marquez 6, exactly. So you go from P3 to P9, and then that's a pretty poor day because at that point then he's behind Quartararo. No, of course all them riders would be ahead of Quartararo as well. So you have to give him his plaudits. He stayed on when many others didn't. Was quick towards the end. I would have liked to know. I reckon in top 5 he would have managed to break into the top 5. With the way I think so. Yeah. The Binders, the Miller mistakes. I still think he would have just came forward. I think he could have gotten a good result regardless. But I think he has lucked his way into a podium today. But again, you don't need to begrudge him because he showed pace. He was consistent. He didn't make any mistakes today. And in fairness, it's good to see him. And hopefully, home race podium, it might spur him onto something for the season because I want a bit more from Zarco. I feel like he might be fading out of the class in the coming year or so. So maybe this is to kick up the ass. He needs to kind of really show why he deserves to be there and maybe go after that victory and shut everyone up about him not winning in GP because it's been such a long time coming and he should have done it years ago. He should have done it in his first race for bloody sake. So it's just it's so long going now and he's come so close, most seconds in history in the class. again, podium today, plaudits to him, but he's just not doing enough for me to warrant that seat. He might be on his way to Superbikes, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it is one of those things because in the last few years he started off the titles like really well. Like he's been like leading the championship the last couple of years, at least one of the rounds, just because of his pace and his consistency. But this year he's not seemed to have that. He seems to have been a bit off it. Although he came second at Portimao, right? If I'm not mistaken, did he do that on the last lap? Or was it not second? He had a good last lap, didn't he? And gained.
He overtook like 2 or 3 people. I think I can find out.
Oh,
where
he
exactly
was second at Argentina, though I believe. So I think he has already.
I think he's had already podium. Yeah, I do believe you're correct in saying that.
Yeah, he's already. So maybe not terrible, but yeah, like you say, his pace wasn't great. I guess. I mean, his late race pace is always so good, but it's like Vinales syndrome. It's like there's nothing you could do at that point. Like everybody's gone already. Like you can't win a race on. They always say you can't win a race on the first lap. You can lose it, but you almost can in a way. Like you can put yourself in contention to win the race on the first lap. Whereas if you don't have a good first lap, you can't win the race. So like you do have to be aggressive. You have to push on the first lap to have a chance at winning. So it's just one of those things. Zarco, it just doesn't seem to. It never seems to fall right for him. You know, think about the amount of times where he's been running second or whatever. He ended up second place, and the guy in front of him has been fine. But then he has 6 people crash out in front of him today, which gives him the 3rd place. But if he's on a good day and he's second place, no one ever crashes in front of him. So there is that kind of element of unfortunate to him in that aspect. Like, it's because like you can finish a solid second place and you can ride a race that maybe wasn't great, you were struggling a bit, but because loads of people fell off, you still end up 3rd. And it's just a bit like, wow, why couldn't that happen one of the weekends where I'm on it and you end up winning the race or whatever. But great for him to be back on the podium, and also probably worth noting that it was top 4 independent bikes for the first time ever as well with that. So that was fantastic. We'll come on to 4th place man in a little bit, but we'll move on to the race winner now. We have mentioned him a little bit, but Bezzecchi, not quite taking the lead of the championship, but almost as good as that. Only 1 point now behind Pecco Bagnaia. Another win, his first dry win in MotoGP. Now that's got to mean a lot more. Now I think, in fairness, he perhaps would have won in Argentina, whether it was wet or dry, but this time, he's properly won the race. Yes, there were a few crashes and things like that, but he was in front of quite a few of those crashes, or around about those areas of those crashes. So he was in the lead group anyway. It wasn't just a case of looking into it. He took the lead and just completely cleared off. No one saw him after that one. Obviously, he also had a drop back 1 position penalty as well. So it seems like if you want to win a race, that's what you've got to do. You've got to get a one drop position for a dodgy overtake, and then you end up winning the race. Last 2 races, that's now happened. Also, maybe being an Italian VR46 rider might be part of that curse as well. I don't know exactly, but yeah, obviously he pulled the dodgy move on Marc Marquez. Fair enough, that actually was a penalty. I will agree with the stewards on that one. That was a good call by them, because it was absolutely nowhere near, and he just ran. Well, he didn't actually hit him, but if Marquez hadn't have picked up, obviously they would have hit. They both ran off the track. Drop 1 position penalty. I'm sure he's not cared at all, because he ended up winning the race still anyway. So great race from Bezzecchi. Just like Argentina, just got to the front and dominated. Seems to be his style. A bit like in Assen last year, sort of got to second place, was quite clear of everybody else behind. Obviously, Bagnaia was a bit clear of him, but he seems to be quite happy with the gap behind him. He seems to definitely be, but he's also a scrapper at the same time. He fights to get there, but he likes to seem to take the lead and pull away if he can, but he can also obviously scrap it out as well.
He is a dangerous man in Clare, as I would say. He doesn't a lot. Some riders you feel are amazing when they're within 2 or 3 seconds. They can get dragged along. I don't feel like that is the case with Bezzecchi. I find that his pace, he's talented enough to do it on his own, and a lot of times when he's in clear areas, when he's quickest. But he does have that VR46 academy about him, where he will send it from way back, and they all seem to have the modern. They seem to have that. All the VR46 riders have that Rossi kind of ingrained DNA, like the Rossi clones of. They're all very quick, very aggressive, and very, very clean in the battle. But a lot of them as well seem to have this. What you wouldn't say would have been Valentino's like forte. It would be more like Lorenzo, where they all seem to be really good leaders. That a lot of them can lead from the front. And again, Bezzecchi gets to the front today, puts a couple of seconds into Marquez, and then does what he needs to do to get to the last lap and last corner. And you really, when you get to the front, and even though he's still in his second season, only won one GP race, not a champion in any of the other classes, race winners in all of them, but you just go, yeah, well, that's done. You just, I have full confidence in Bezzecchi, and I can't wait till maybe he gets a factory seat. I think he can go that far. It just consistency. He just needs to be there more week in, week out, really. At the moment, he's just slightly inconsistent. I think the way the season's going, where there's quite a lot of crashes in the race, I think he's benefited from that. I think the few times he stayed, that he's not on the pace, he's managed to pull a result out just by being consistent and being there. So going forward, I'm looking closely on his performances, really. I don't know if he can do it over the full season. I think Pekka will have too much from him, and maybe Binder, but I don't think this will be the last race win of his season. Definitely will have more podiums. If he can maybe start out his qualifying. His qualifying isn't his best at the moment. If he can start on the front row, there's no reason why he can't stay there and battle for the win each weekend. Just as I end up there, just going back to Zarco for a second. Fourth, second, seventh, 0 and third is his result so far. So he's at 2 podiums, and he's been thereabouts in most races, even when he crashed out in Jerez. So again, he's always kind of there, but nothing special. Just to finish off the Zarco point.
All right, thank you for that. Always getting up the results at hand. That's always nice to see. But yeah, Bezzecchi, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't at least get an upgrade in equipment for next year.
100%.
Yeah, like he's definitely going to have a GP24, I would say. Whether that's in the Pramac team, I don't know, because I do have a feeling that they might move him up there. But I feel like Bautista staying in World Superbikes actually affected how the Ducati hierarchy is going to go now. Because I felt like they were going to ship Zarco off to Superbike, but I mean they still could. Yeah. And they could still put him in the place for an Audi. I think he'd do a much better job. But I feel like maybe Bassani's got his hands on that seat. So it'll be interesting to see how these musical chairs work out. But I think Bezzecchi will at least have an upgrade in equipment. He might want to stay in the VR46 team as well. You know, it's a happy environment where he's with his friends and stuff like that. Obviously, other Italian people. So maybe it's actually better for him to stay there and get a better bike than to move into Pramac, for example, onto a factory bike. So we'll have to see how it pans out for him. But yeah, I can't agree with you there. I don't think he's going to take the championship to the end. It just doesn't seem to happen. And he's not consistent enough, to be completely honest. Obviously, he's had a few good results. But it is still very early in the season. We've seen this many, many times. A satellite rider lead this early into the season. I know he's not even leading, but you know what I mean. He's a satellite rider on a good performance, like Bastianini, for example, last year. Then they start to go missing for a couple of rounds here and there. So it'll be interesting. I think you're right. I think he will pick up some more victories, but I don't think it'll be long before Bagnaia sort of gets himself together and starts going on a bit of a streak.
We'd hope so, yeah.
Maybe. But moving on to someone that we really want to give a bit of a shout out for, Augusto Fernandez. I mean, if you said that you had money on him finishing 4th place today, 1, you're a liar, but 2, if you did, you're probably going to get a decent payout from that one, because Augusto, no one saw this one coming, but a fantastic ride from the rookie. I must say, I didn't really expect to see anything from him this year at all. I was almost just worried for him, thinking that I've seen how they get churned out of Tech 3, but I think he's proved in this race alone that's not going to happen to him. Probably under the most pressure he's going to be on all season at the team's home Grand Prix. Maybe, a little bit in Austria as well, with it being the KTM Grand Prix. But Tech 3's home Grand Prix delivers top KTM as well. So he beat Brad Binder. I know Miller fell off, but he beat Binder genuinely because, all right, Binder did have contact or whatever, ran down the path, but then he made his own mistake, got a long lap penalty, things like that. So, fair play to Augusto Fernandez, because he was not a million miles off the podium. He was right there.
Yeah, and to be fair, he's been actually quick all weekend. He didn't look into it. I know we talked about Zarco kind of looking his way into the podium, and you could probably say the same about Augusto, but the fact is, Augusto was there all weekend. He had a kind of poor sprint. I think maybe the nerves got to him of being so far up the grid and being so... knowing that maybe if I have a good start and I could make something happen. I think it just went backwards, and then I think maybe it was all a bit too much. So I think maybe today, long race, right, I just need to get a clean opening lap, settle down, get to my rhythm. I know what I can do, and just leave the race happen in front of me. And he did a great job. And again, will it be enough to save him his seat? I don't know. I feel like when he got promoted, he was pushed up into that seat, and he's just a seat warmer for another rider next year. I hope to be wrong. I don't mind Augusto. I quite like the guy. I'd like to see him stay there. So he's doing a good enough job. Again, KTM have made a step, so that gas is better than what Remy Gardner threw himself to the sky in last year's Le Mans GP when he crashed coming out of a museum. So he's definitely on better equipment than the two last year. Will it be enough to keep his seat? Probably not, unless he can take it and run with this for the season and keep going. To be honest, I have a feeling, regardless of what Augusta does, he's probably going to lose his seat, and it's a damning shame, really, because it's just unnecessary from KTM to be bringing these riders up if you're not going to give him time and give him what he wants, a couple of seasons on the bike to build. He definitely has speed. He's quite big, Augusta, so I could see him manhandling a KTM into some good results this season, but everyone's kind of thought, yeah, he's going to have an average season, and I think he's proved that again. Moto2 champion, he is class, and today he showed really what he's able to do.
Yeah, he really did. He really has shown great pace. I mean, he's been pretty quick since he got on it. I mean, I've been quite impressed with him all season, even though he's not done an awful lot. He's been a lot better than Fernandez and Gardner were last year. I mean, I know the bike is not the same. The bike is a lot better. And in fairness, he's got like the whole team around him, because Paul has obviously been out since the beginning with an injury. All right, he's had Folger on the other side of the garage, but are they really going to put their efforts into the test rider that they've drafted in? Probably not. Obviously, I know he's going to still have his fair crack. He's going to have his mechanics and stuff in there, but one would imagine that they're trying to build themselves around Augusto Fernandez, and I believe there are some rumours that Pedro might stay in Moto2 for another year after this one, so Augusto's seat might be safe, because obviously I know we were being a bit harsh, maybe sort of saying that he could lose his seat, but the general consensus was that Acosta's going to come up to the seat, so it's going to be gone regardless of whether he does well. Even if he won the championship, perhaps he was going to be out of a seat, but we'll have to see how it pans out, because maybe Acosta might not steal that seat in the end, and I'd be happy to see him continue, because so far he's done a really good job. Probably some other rounds where he also will do well, and to be fair, I mean, if it's a bit of a crazy race, he could pick up a podium. I mean, it's not out of the question. I mean, it was pretty crazy today. Obviously, quite a few crashes in front of him, but again, he's only going to get quicker. He's only going to get quicker as the season goes on, and I must say, I don't particularly know off the top of my head if there's any Augusto Fernandez specials in terms of tracks, but
Misano.
Well, yeah.
Done well there.
You're not allowed to go on the green on the last lap anymore, though. And you definitely get a penalty for the move he pulled as well.
100%, yeah.
So, we'll have to see how it pans out, but that's everything for the French Grand Prix. I might put you on the spot and say what your predictions for the Italian Grand Prix coming up next. Well, a few weeks' time, but who's going to win the Italian Grand Prix?
Before we get into that, right, I just had a quick look at Twitter there as we were rounding up, and before we end off the French GP, just to round off all the madness, Fabio Quartararo has revealed that an aggressive arm massage before the French MotoGP led to arm pump problems during the Le Mans race. If Fabio could have a worse day, I don't think it was possible. An aggressive massage arm pump led to his poor performance. Now, did we realise he had that? No, because we just thought it was his pace, but his pace was even worse in clean air. So, yeah, I just had to get that out there. Just had a quick look through it, because it's a couple of hours after the race now, and you just get these little snippets. It was only up on Twitter 2 minutes when I read it first, so I just wanted to save that for the end. But
that's Yamaha's physio out of a job then.
Exactly, yeah. So
that's what we need to change. It's not the bike, it's the physio.
Exactly. So, unfortunately, Yamaha's season goes from bad to worse. On to Mugello. I'm going to go Pecco. I know it's boring, but it suits his style, fast flowing. I'm going to go Pecco. I'd be pretty confident Pecco there. Ducati territory. I think Brad Binder could have a good weekend, but again, you probably say that about every weekend for Brad. But yeah, I'm going to put my money on Pecco. Probably the boring and the easy choice, really. It's like betting on Marquez in Texas. It's kind of like what you'd expect to happen. You're fairly short at Pecco.
You'd have been disappointed if you betted on him this year.
Yeah, jeez, yeah.
You put that bet in before the season started.
Oh yeah, but Pecco. I think Ducatis are going to just romp away. I'm looking forward to Bezzecchi home race for. Hope we might get a special livery for Mugello for VR46. I really hope we would. Maybe
I think we will probably.
Drudy
will come out with something special.
Yeah, tricolore down the side of the swing arm and the frame and stuff. So yeah, Ducatis to romp at home is kind of what I predict. But again, everyone probably predicts that. What about yourself?
I actually do have a bit of a Bezzecchi feeling. I can't lie, because I remember last year both of the R46 guys were pretty strong in the race.
They were both on the front row last year in the wet, weren't they?
Yeah,
in qualifying.
Yeah, they were, because Di Antonio was on pole as well.
I remember that.
Speaking of someone that might lose a seat, but I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. To be fair, but I know it's kind of irrelevant, but just judging off everything we've seen from him so far. But yeah, I think Bezzecchi could have a good shot. It's probably a bit of a risk, but you know what? He looked good there last year. I put my money on him. Obviously, I was either going to say that or Vinales. Obviously, of course, I always say Vinales is going to win, but maybe it's time to change. Maybe that's not going to happen anytime soon. We'll wait till we get to Silverstone, then I'll put my money back on him once again. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you are listening on Spotify, if you could rate the podcast 5 stars, that would be really appreciated. Or if you're watching it on Dill's channel, do give the video a like. Or if you want to check out my channel as well, mine's Biker Gaming, because I don't actually put the podcast on there anymore because it's not really worth having it in two places at once. So if you want to hear more from us, those are the places you can find us. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We'll see you in 3 weeks' time for the Italian Grand Prix at Mugello.